Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. Where, after all, do human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. These are the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, who said this in a speech marking the 10th anniversary of the UDHR, named among those places as the factory, the farm, and the office. She was reaffirming the intent of the UDHR, that it was not merely a contract between the state and the citizen, but applied to and affected everyone, all the time, anywhere. The declaration was drafted in the wake of the cataclysmic World War II. Picture the Allied soldiers walking through the ruins of Europe and discovering the ultimate horror of the Holocaust, liberating sick and emaciated survivors in concentration camps. The mass atrocities of that war led to the creation of new institutions in the hope that such a conflict would never happen again. Never again, the world resolved. The distinguished Norwegian diplomat Jan Eliasson would put it rather well later. There can be no peace without development, no development without peace, and no lasting peace or sustainable development without respect for human rights and the rule of law. Together with the Chinese philosopher Peng Chung-chang, the French Nobel laureate René Cassin, Lebanese philosopher Charles Malik, Indian educationist Hansa Mehta, and other experts, Eleanor Roosevelt and this group of women and men crafted a declaration that has stood the test of time. It brings together civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, showing how interconnected, interwoven, complementary, universal, and inalienable these rights are. True, the politics of the Cold War created a division between those focused on civil and political rights and others on economic, social, and cultural rights. True again, governments did as they wished, placing some rights over others, and as the years passed, some criticized the declaration as outdated or imposing Western norms and values or placing rights over duties to community. We should be cautious of speaking of Western norms. As Frank Mugisha, the Ugandan LGBTQI rights activist, puts it, homosexuality was always part of Africa. Homophobia was a Western import. Many governments calling for human rights often neglect their own obligations to respect, protect, promote, or fulfill human rights, using power imbalance or cultural relativism as an excuse. While aspects of various faiths and philosophies do align with human rights, some traditions and schools of thought perpetuate discrimination against those who worship differently or not at all, against women, different ethnicities, or those of different sexual orientation, class, caste, abilities, and so on. The Declaration's beauty is how it weaves together the nobler elements of all traditions and creates a document that treats everyone equally as a universal, common standard of humanity. It lets us interpret modern challenges and dilemmas. Electronic surveillance, the UDHR refers to privacy and arbitrary detention. Forced labor or servitude, there are strictures against that. Health and environment, the declaration anticipates that too, and it does so in ways that allow rights-enabling leadership and all of us to apply the principles to our time. This language has inspired countless leaders. At the conclusion of his Rivonia trial in 1964, before he was taken away for 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela said, "I've cherished the ideals of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." That determination comes from a desire to fight injustice, something we must. Yes, Elie Wiesel. There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must be never a time when we fail to protest. Or the brave Honduran, Berta Cacares. They are afraid of us because we are not afraid of them. And over in Iran, Narges Mohammadi, this year's Nobel laureate, has said, "Women will not give up. We are fueled by a will to survive, whether we are inside prison or outside." Long before William Wilberforce in England and Abraham Lincoln in the US removed the shackles of slavery, in 1511, the Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas was imploring the conquistadors, "Tell me, by what right or justice do you hold these Indians in such a cruel and horrible servitude? If those words indicate why civil and political rights are crucial, here's Mohandas Gandhi from India, where I was born, speaking of how those of us with power must use it to remove miseries of those who lack access to basic necessities. Weeks before he was assassinated, he said, "I will give you a talisman. Whenever you are in doubt or when the self becomes too much with you, apply the following test. Recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man or woman whom you may have seen and ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him or her. Will he or she gain anything by it? Then you will find your doubts and your self will melt away." Factory, farm, and office. It is the infrastructure that we are talking about. And it is instructive that when Roosevelt spoke of those rights, she spoke of places where we work, private spaces run by businesses. The declaration itself, in affirming that every individual and every organ of society had responsibilities to promote its objectives. It was pointing to the reality that the world of business had a role to play as well. But business meant money and capital and power. Business sought profit, and its pursuit of profit and efficiency, it would inevitably cut corners, seek fewer regulations, sometimes manipulate markets, and exploit workers. Businesses went around the world to trade and ended up colonizing vast territories. In West Africa, as it sought to produce energy, it left a devastated landscape and destroyed environment. In reducing cost of production of a vast range of products, from garments to consumer electronics, it sought out workers in Asia and beyond, driving down standards, wages, and undermining trade unions. Its poor regard for safety standards gave us disastrous outcomes in places like Bhopal in India and Dhaka in Bangladesh. More recently, companies have contributed to or benefited from armed conflict, raising the risk of being complicit in Syria, Sudan, and elsewhere. And yet, there has been an exemplary conduct by businesses and business executives. In Nigeria, I know of cases where during a period of bitter ethnic conflict, one oil company made its helicopters available to fly local people to safety. During the Second World War, Oskar Schindler saved the lives of countless Jews, employing them in his factories to prevent them from being sent to death camps. In Rwanda, Paul Rusesabagina opened the doors of his hotel to provide refuge to Tutsis during the genocide. In 2019, Carola Rackete, the German scientist and ship captain, defied the Italian government and brought refugees stranded at sea to safety at Lampedusa. And Arne Renan did the same, saving more than 400 Afghan refugees in 2001, defying an adamant Australian government. Companies operating in Ireland during the Troubles signed the McBride Principles to make sure that sectarian strife did not infect the workforce. And during apartheid South Africa, many companies signed the Sullivan Principles to ensure equal pay for equal work and equal opportunities for all, regardless of color. In more recent years, companies have come together in multi-stakeholder initiatives to act in ways that respect human rights in how their facilities are guarded, where they buy minerals from, how they share revenue with governments, as well as speaking out in public, defending the Black Lives Matter movement here in the US, and speaking out for LGBTQI rights in the US and beyond. We face immense humanitarian crisis. The climate crisis demands a collective shift from our carbon-intensive, heat-generating environment to a cleaner, rights-respecting future based on just transitions. Automation threatens to social stability as jobs become obsolete. Artificial intelligence offers a more fun world, less tedious future, which poses existential challenges. Rising xenophobia produces politicians offering simplistic solutions. Over 60 elections, including in countries as influential as the US, Russia, India, South Africa, and Indonesia loom. And amid 60 global conflicts, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the terrible attack on Israel in October, and Israel's devastating and disproportionate response in Gaza challenge our world order. With such realities, it's fair to ask, do the words of the UDHR still matter? Do they continue to resonate in such a bleak scenario? Can business play a constructive role in helping to strengthen and renew the international architecture intended to protect the rights we all believe that belong to all the people? We must believe in a better tomorrow. I turn to Gandhi again. When I despair, he said, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible. But in the end, they always fail. Think of it. always. This is not naive optimism on my part or a desire for a fairy tale ending. To conclude, I leave us with the words of Václav Havel. Hope is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. Those words should guide us from tomorrow and beyond. Thank you.